The road's got a memory. You drive it long enough, you start to feel it. It remembers every breakdown, every near miss, every soul that ever got too tired and closed their eyes for just a second too long. It remembers the heat, the cold, the weight of every rig that's ever scarred its back. I've been driving these veins of America for the better part of 20 years, and I've learned to listen to that memory. Most days, it's just a low hum beneath the tires, a steady companion. But some days it screams. This story is about one of those days. It started in Kansas. The state itself feels like a pause, a deep breath the country takes before it gets to the mountains. Flat, wide, and under a sky so big it can make you feel like an ant. My pickup was at one of those self-storage places out in the middle of nowhere. You know the kind. Endless rows of identical metal doors, baking in the sun, each one holding on to somebody's forgotten life. My manifest just said personal effects. Usually that means furniture, clothes, maybe some dusty photo albums. Easy work. The guy who owned the stuff was this thin, weathered man with eyes that looked 1,000 years old. He didn't say much, just unlocked the unit and gestured inside with a bony hand. The air that rolled out was stale, thick with the smell of dust and time. It was just boxes, maybe 30 of them, all different shapes and sizes, sealed with yellowed tape. "Just load 'em up," he said, his voice like gravel. "They're heading east." So I started working. The Kansas sun beating down on my neck. The silence was the strangest part. No birds, no traffic, just the scrape of cardboard on the floor of my trailer and the clang of the roll-up door and the occasional breeze. I was about halfway through when it happened. I grabbed a box from the back corner, one that felt lighter than the others. The cardboard was brittle, weakened by years of heat and neglect, and as I lifted it, the bottom just gave way. And it fell out. It wasn't a smash of glass or a clatter of old junk. It was a soft, dull thud. There on the dusty concrete lay a doll. It was one of those old porcelain ones, maybe 2 feet tall. It had this pale, cracked face with these big, glassy blue eyes that just seemed empty. They didn't reflect the light right, they just swallowed it. Its hair was a mess of faded blonde curls, and it wore this lacy, once white dress that was now the color of old bones. But the worst part was its mouth. It was painted into a tiny, perfect bow, but the corners were turned just slightly upwards. Not a smile, a smirk, a cold, knowing little smirk. I just stared at it for a second. There are some things that are old and some things that just feel wrong. This doll felt wrong. The old man shuffled over. He looked down at the doll, then at me. There wasn't a flicker of surprise or sentiment in his eyes. "Ah, that thing," he grunted. "Forgot she was in there." "You want me to find a new box for it?" I asked, already dreading having to touch it. He waved a dismissive hand. "Nah, you can have it if you want, or just toss it. I don't care. Just get the rest of this junk on your truck." I didn't want it. God, I didn't want it. I looked at its creepy, smirking face, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave it right there on the dust. But I wasn't raised that way. You don't just leave things in the middle of the road, even trash. It felt disrespectful somehow, and I didn't want to be the guy who threw some little girl's old toy in a dumpster. So, against my better judgment, I picked it up. The porcelain was cold, unnaturally so, even in the blistering Kansas heat. I finished loading the rest of the boxes, my mind still on the doll. When I was done, I walked back to my cab. I couldn't put it in the sleeper. I didn't want that thing anywhere near where I slept, and I couldn't put it in the trailer with the rest of the load, so I did the only other thing I could think of. I opened the passenger door, sat the doll on the seat, and buckled the seatbelt over it, mostly as a joke to myself, just to get it out of the way. I remember turning the key, the big diesel engine roaring to life, and I glanced over. The doll sat there, staring straight ahead through the windshield. I put the rig in gear and pulled out of that dusty, silent place, leaving the old man standing there like a scarecrow. As I hit the highway and got up to speed, I had this feeling, a cold prickle on the back of my neck, The kind of feeling you get when you know without a doubt that you are not alone and that you are being watched. Night driving is a different world. The country you see by day disappears, replaced by a universe of your own making, contained within the bubble of your headlights. It's just you, the engine, the endless ribbon of asphalt, and the crackle of the CB radio. It's a lonely job, but you get used to the solitude. You make friends with it. But that night, the solitude was gone. It had been replaced by a presence. For the first 100 miles or so, I tried to ignore it. I turned up the radio, listened to some late-night talk show about politics, anything to fill the cab with human voices. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It was like an itch in the middle of my back I couldn't scratch. Every few minutes, I'd find my eyes drifting from the road to the passenger seat. The doll just sat there, buckled in, its porcelain face glowing faintly in the green light from the dashboard. It was still facing forward, a silent, still co-pilot. I told myself it was just my imagination. Long hours, not enough sleep, the weirdness of the pickup. It was all getting to me. I was a professional. I'd seen strange things on the road, dealt with strange people. A creepy doll wasn't going to spook me. I hit a rough patch of road somewhere in Missouri, the kind that rattles your teeth. The truck bucked, and I heard a slight rustle from the passenger seat. I didn't think anything of it. But when the road smoothed out, I looked over, and my blood ran cold. The doll was no longer staring out the windshield. Its head was turned, just slightly, to its left. It was looking right at me. Those dead glass eyes were fixed on my face. The smirk on its painted lips seemed wider now, more pronounced in the shadows. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Okay," I said out loud, my voice sounding thin and strange in the cab. "Okay." I reached over with my right hand, my fingers trembling slightly, and I physically turned its head back to face the front. The porcelain neck made a faint, dry, scraping sound. "You stay looking at the road," I muttered, feeling like a fool. I focused on my driving, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I counted the mile markers. I watched for deer on the shoulder. I did everything I could not to look over again, but it was impossible. The feeling of being watched was a physical weight now. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. It felt like an eternity. I finally broke. I took a quick, nervous glance to my right. It was looking at me again. Its head was turned, its empty eyes locked on me, the exact same position as before. This time, I didn't say anything. A different kind of fear started to set in, something colder and deeper than a simple jump scare. This wasn't just my imagination. The truck's vibrations couldn't have done that twice so precisely. I hadn't hit any more bumps. The cab was a stable, controlled environment, and that thing, it had moved. I pulled into a rest stop, my hands shaking so bad I could barely keep the truck straight. I needed to get out. I needed air. I killed the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. I just sat there for a full minute, staring at the doll. In the stillness of the cab, it looked even more sinister. Its gaze was unwavering, challenging. I felt a surge of anger mixed with my fear. I unbuckled the seatbelt, grabbed the doll by its brittle lace dress, and turned it around completely. I wedged it firmly against the passenger window so its back was to me and it was staring out at the dark parking lot. "There," I hissed. "Stay that way." I got out and walked a few laps around my truck, the cool night air doing little to calm my racing heart. I checked my tires, I checked my lights. I did all the routine things, trying to anchor myself back into reality. This was my truck, my space. I was in control. After a few minutes, I convinced myself I had just been tired, spooked. I was letting a child's toy get the best of me. Feeling a little more grounded, I climbed back into the cab, took a deep breath, and started the engine. I promised myself I wouldn't look over. I'd just drive. I drove for another hour, the tension slowly building again. The silence in the cab was thick with unspoken questions. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I told myself I was just checking to make sure it hadn't fallen over. Slowly, deliberately, I turned my head. The doll was no longer facing the window. It had turned itself all the way around on the seat, and it was staring right at me, its painted smirk seeming to glisten in the dashboard lights. It was waiting for me.
Panic is a funny thing. It's not like in the movies. It doesn't always make you scream. Sometimes it just makes you quiet. It steals the air from your lungs and replaces it with ice. For a solid mile, I didn't move a muscle except to steer. I just drove, my mind a complete blank. The whole world outside my windshield, the trees, the signs, the other headlights, it all melted away into an indistinct blur. The only real thing in the universe was me, the rumbling of my engine, and the silent, staring thing in the seat next to me. I had to get away from it. Not just out of the cab for a minute, but away. I saw a sign for a 24-hour truck stop up ahead, a beacon of greasy food and hot coffee. It felt like a lighthouse in a storm. My plan formed instantly. I was going to stop, get coffee, and I was going to leave that thing behind. I didn't care anymore about being respectful or tidy. This thing wasn't a toy. It was something else. I pulled into the massive, brightly lit parking lot, finding a spot at the far end where the other long haulers were settled in for the night. I killed the engine. Before I even unbuckled my own seatbelt, I looked at the doll. Its eyes seemed to follow me as I moved. I felt a surge of defiance. This was my truck. I got out, and as I shut the door, I made a point of hitting the lock button. I heard the solid thunk of the locks engaging. I double-checked the handle. Solid. I walked around and checked the passenger side, too. Locked tight. I stood there for a moment, in the cool, diesel-scented air, looking at the cab. Through the window, I could see the doll's silhouette on the passenger seat. Safe. Trapped. The truck stop was an oasis of noise and light, the smell of frying bacon, the clatter of plates, the low murmur of conversations from tired drivers. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I slid into a booth, the vinyl cracked and cool, and ordered the largest, blackest coffee they had. I sat there, cradling the warm mug, letting the normalcy of the place wash over me. I watched other drivers come and go, their faces etched with the same road weariness I felt. They were talking about dispatchers, about bad weather in the Rockies, about their families. Real things. Normal things. I started to feel better. I told myself I'd had a waking nightmare, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. The human mind can play powerful tricks, especially when you're alone in the dark for 12 hours at a time. The doll hadn't moved. I had imagined it. I was sure of it. I finished my coffee, paid the bill, and walked back out into the parking lot, feeling almost human again. The fear had receded, leaving behind only the echo of embarrassment. I saw my rig from 100 yards away, a dark monolith among the others. As I got closer, my steps slowed. Something was wrong. It was a small detail, a shape that shouldn't have been there. There, sitting on the dashboard, was the doll. It wasn't on the seat anymore. It had moved from the passenger seat, a distance of at least 2 feet, and was now propped up against the inside of the windshield. It was pressed right up against the glass, its face tilted up slightly, its cold glass eyes looking straight out through the window. It was looking right at the door. It was looking right at me as I approached. I stopped dead. My coffee cup slipped from my numb fingers and crashed onto the asphalt, splashing brown liquid across my boots. The truck was locked. The engine was off. I had the only key in my pocket. There was no vibration, no pothole, no rational explanation left. There was no way for it to have moved. No human way. I don't remember making a decision. My body just acted. Primal fear took over. I fumbled for my keys, my hands shaking violently. I unlocked the door, yanked it open, and the dome light flickered on, illuminating the scene. The doll sat there, its painted smirk, looking smug, victorious. I didn't hesitate. I reached in, grabbed it by its head. The porcelain was still so cold, and I scrambled out of the cab. I ran from my own truck towards the edge of the parking lot where the manicured grass gave way to a dark, weed-choked ditch that ran alongside the highway. With a guttural yell that was torn from my throat, I threw the doll as hard as I could. I watched it tumble end over end through the air, a pale shape against the dark sky, before it disappeared into the overgrown ditch with a muffled thud. I stood there panting, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. It was gone. I was free. I turned and walked back to my truck, not looking back. The cab felt huge and empty when I climbed in. The air was still and quiet. But for the rest of the night, I learned that just because you can't see something doesn't mean it's not there.
Getting back behind the wheel felt different. The cab, which had been my home and my castle for years, now felt like a violated space. The passenger seat was empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt vacant, like something was supposed to be there, and its absence was a presence all its own. I ran a hand over my face, trying to wipe away the sweat and the fear. I just needed to drive. I needed to put miles between me and that ditch. I pulled out of the truck stop and merged back onto the interstate. The road was dark, the rhythmic thump-thump of the tires on the pavement the only sound. I refused to let my mind wander. I focused on the mechanics of driving. Check the mirrors, watch the gauges, keep it between the lines. It was a mantra of normalcy. It was during one of those routine mirror checks that my world tilted on its axis again. I glanced at the passenger side mirror, the big convex one that shows you your blind spot. For a split second, I saw what I expected to see: the dark flank of my trailer and the fleeting lights of the highway behind me. But then I saw something else, a flicker of movement inside the cab's reflection. I snapped my head to the passenger seat. Nothing. It was empty. Just the worn fabric of the seat, shadowed and still. My heart started to pound again. "You're seeing things," I whispered. "You're exhausted. Your brain is filling in the blanks." I forced myself to look back at the road, but it was like trying not to touch a hot stove. The urge to check again was overwhelming. A few minutes later, I did it. I slowly, deliberately, let my eyes drift back to the passenger side mirror. And there it was.
It wasn't a flicker this time. It was clear. In the reflection, sitting perfectly upright in the passenger seat, was the doll. I could see its pale face, its messy blonde curls, its lacy dress. It was reflected in the mirror as clearly as if it were still sitting there. I slammed on the brakes, the whole rig groaning and shuddering as it slowed. The air brakes hissed in protest. I stared, mesmerized and horrified, into the mirror. The reflection was stable, unwavering. The doll was in my truck. But when I whipped my head around to look at the actual seat, it was still empty. There was nothing there. A wave of nausea washed over me. This was worse. This was impossible. This broke the laws of physics, of light, of everything I knew to be real. A ghost in the machine. A phantom in the glass. I started driving again, slowly this time, my eyes flicking back and forth between the empty seat beside me and the horrifying reflection in the mirror. And then it got worse. In the reflection, the doll's head turned, slowly, just like it had before. It turned until its reflected glassy eyes were looking right into my reflected eyes in the mirror. We were staring at each other through a looking-glass world. And then, the final, sanity-shredding horror. I swear on my life, its mouth moved. The tiny, painted, smirking lips parted. They moved, silently, deliberately. There was no sound, not over the roar of the engine, but I could see it forming words. It was like watching a movie with the sound turned off. The movements were small, precise. It was talking. It was talking to me from inside the mirror. I couldn't make out the words. Was it a name? A warning? A question? I didn't know, and I didn't want to know. My mind reeled. I felt a scream building in my chest, a raw, primal noise of pure terror. I covered the mirror with my hand, but I could still feel its gaze through my own skin. I started driving faster, pushing the engine, hammering down the highway as if I could outrun my own reflection. But all night long, every time I dared to look, it was there. The phantom passenger, the ghost in the glass, staring at me. Its mouth moving, its silent message lost to the roar of the road. It was trying to tell me something, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was going to be listening for the rest of my life.
Dawn is supposed to bring relief. The first gray light that bleeds over the horizon is meant to chase away the monsters of the night, but not that day. When the sun finally rose, casting long shadows across the fields of Illinois, the cab of my truck didn't feel safer. It just felt illuminated. I risked the glance at the mirror. The reflection was gone. With the daylight flooding the cab, the phantom image had vanished. The mirror just showed the road, the sky, the world as it was supposed to be. But the relief I expected never came. Knowing it was gone from the mirror didn't erase the memory of it being there. I felt like I had a fever that had broken, leaving me weak, hollowed out, and aching. I made the delivery in a daze. I backed the trailer up to the loading dock, signed the papers, and watched the crew unload the boxes. I saw them take out the other 30 or so containers, the forgotten life of that old man in Kansas, my real cargo. But my mind was on the one piece of cargo I had tried to get rid of. I felt a strange, illogical pang of guilt when the trailer was empty. I had failed to deliver the whole load. The drive back west was the longest of my career. The cab was just a space, but it was haunted. The passenger seat was a cold spot that drew my eye constantly. Every glint of light off the dashboard, every shadow in the corner of my eye made me jump. I'd be driving, and for a split second, the reflection of a passing car in my window would look like a pale face.
When I finally got back to my home terminal, the first thing I did was clean my truck. I scoured it. I threw out every piece of trash, I vacuumed every inch of the floor, I wiped down the dashboard, the steering wheel, and the passenger seat with disinfectant, trying to scrub away the memory, the feeling of its presence. I polished the inside of every window and every mirror until they gleamed, as if I could wipe away the phantom I'd seen within them. It didn't work. That was years ago. I still drive. It's the only thing I know how to do. But something changed in me on that long, dark road from Kansas. I'm not the same man. I'm quieter. I check my mirrors more often than I need to. I don't pick up loads from strange, dusty storage units anymore, and I will take a 1,000-mile detour to avoid driving through Kansas at night. This story's become a part of me, a piece of the road's memory that got stuck to my soul. Other drivers have their tales of phantom headlights, of the black dog of fatigue, but I never tell them mine. It's too real, too close. But sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in a motel room after a long haul, I'll see it. I'll be washing my face, and I look up into the mirror, and just for a heartbeat, in the reflection behind my own tired eyes, I'll see a flicker of pale porcelain and a knowing, silent smirk. It's never there when I turn around. It never stays. It's just an echo. I've had a lot of years to think about that night, to wonder what it was and what it wanted, to replay those silent moving lips in my mind. And you know the scariest part? After all this time, driving all these lonely roads, I think I'm finally starting to understand what it was trying to tell me. It was saying, you can throw me away, but you can never, ever leave me behind.